The rain hit hard like pins against the roof of the Bentley. Windshield wipers struggled against the sheets of water as the black car curved slowly along the gravel road, leading up to the Cain estate, one of the most imposing mansions on the outskirts of Connecticut. Inside, Alexander Cain sat in silence, eyes glued to the glowing screen of his tablet, reviewing quarterly losses and market adjustments like nothing outside mattered. At 55, Alexander wasn't just a man of wealth, he was Cain Tech. Ruthless, brilliant, and completely alone. "Sir," his driver said quietly, glancing at the rearview mirror, "we seem to have lost power." The engine stalling, Alexander barely looked up. "What do you mean, lost power?" The engine warning light just came on. "We're still within the estate perimeter, but the vehicle's dying." With a grunt of annoyance, Alexander tossed his tablet on the seat beside him and looked out the rain-slicked window. The iron gates of his mansion were just up ahead, barely 100 feet away. Beyond them loomed the dark silhouette of the estate, towering stone walls, high archways, flickering security lights. "Home. Pull us in manually," he muttered. "I'm not sitting out here in a storm." But then, as the driver stepped out to access the emergency override box near the gate, Alexander saw something that made him freeze. Two small figures. At first, they looked like shadows, barely visible under the curtain of rain. But then a flash of lightning revealed them more clearly. Two children, tiny, huddled together by the front gate of his mansion, drenched and shivering. He narrowed his eyes. Both boys looked to be no older than 4 or 5. One had his arms wrapped around the other protectively, his shirt soaked to the skin. Their small backpacks, if you could call them that, lay discarded beside them, as if too heavy to carry any longer. One of them was crying softly. The other had gone silent. Alexander reached for the button to roll down his window, not even realizing he was holding his breath. The boy who was standing suddenly looked up and met his gaze. Even through the rain, even from a distance, something about those eyes. And then it happened. The smaller one, the one who had been crying, rose to his knees and pointed toward the car. "Daddy," he called out, voice cracking. "Daddy, please." Alexander Cain froze. It was like time collapsed around him. The air in his lungs vanished. He wasn't a man easily rattled, not by markets, not by tragedy. But in that single moment, something unspoken, something buried for years, broke the surface. Before he even realized he was doing it, Alexander opened the car door and stepped out. Rain instantly soaked his custom wool coat. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes as he walked toward the gate, slow at first, then faster. The boys recoiled slightly as he approached, scared, unsure. The taller one tried to shield his brother again, but the smaller one kept staring at him. "I'm not your Alexander," started to say, but the words stuck. He knelt in front of them, rain dripping from his hair, his knees digging into cold stone. "What are your names?" he asked, voice hoarse. "I'm Noah," said the taller one, eyes wide. "This is Luca. Where are your parents?" Alexander asked, glancing behind them, half expecting some adult to appear from the shadows. But there was no one. Just wind, rain, and the sound of his own heart beating louder than reason. "Our mom. She's gone," Noah whispered. "And the man said we couldn't stay," Luca added, still trembling. "He left us here. He said, maybe you'd take us." Alexander's jaw clenched. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not to him. He had built a life so carefully structured and vulnerable. Cain Tech had survived market crashes and lawsuits. He had survived betrayal, bankruptcy, even the death of his twin brother Sebastian years ago. He didn't let the world reach in anymore. And yet, here it was, reaching in, through 2 broken voices, through 2 soaking, shivering boys at his gate, through eyes, especially Luca's eyes, that looked achingly familiar. His driver called out from the car. "Sir." "Do you want me to?" Alexander didn't answer. He stood slowly, eyes still locked on the boys, and reached into his coat pocket to unlock the security panel beside the gate. The latch clicked. The iron doors creaked open. "Come inside," he said quietly. "You'll catch pneumonia out here." Noah hesitated, glancing at his brother. "Is it okay?" "Yes." Alexander's voice was gentler this time. "Just for tonight." They stepped forward, small, hesitant feet, into a mansion that had known nothing but silence and status for over a decade. The door closed behind them, locking out the storm, but not what had already been let in. The Cain Mansion had always been cold. Not in temperature, its geothermal system ensured the marble floors never felt anything less than perfect, but in essence. No children's laughter had ever echoed down the grand staircase. No toy had ever cluttered the Persian rugs. No fingerprints had ever smudged the towering glass windows that overlooked the garden. Until tonight, Mrs. Dalloway, the housekeeper of nearly 20 years, looked as though she'd seen a ghost when Alexander entered the foyer, soaked to the bone and flanked by two trembling little boys. "Sir," she asked, blinking twice, Are these guests?" "They're staying the night," Alexander said, brushing past her. "Prepare something warm for them. Towels, dry clothes, soup, whatever you'd give frightened children." She stared at him, stunned. But when she caught sight of the smaller one, Luca sniffling quietly into his brother's sleeve, something in her expression softened. "Yes, sir, of course." Alexander led the boys into the drawing room. The fire was already crackling inside the hearth, casting warm amber shadows across the walls. He gestured to the armchairs by the flames. "Sit," he said gently. "You're safe now." Noah helped his brother climb into one of the armchairs. Luca curled his knees into his chest, his wet clothes sticking to the upholstery, but he didn't care. His eyes never left Alexander. "Do you live here alone?" Noah asked after a beat. Alexander hesitated. "Yes." There was a pause. "So did we," Noah said. "After Mom died." Alexander's throat tightened. "Tell me what happened," he asked. "Who was that man who left you at the gate?" "He was Mom's friend," Noah said. "He stayed with us after she got sick. But then he said he couldn't be our dad. He said it wasn't his problem anymore," Luca whispered, "and that we should come here, because you'd know what to do. Why would he think that Alexander asked more to himself than them?" "I don't know," Noah said. "But you look like someone." Alexander's breath caught. He turned away, walking to the mantel where an old photo rested behind the antique clock. It was dusty, he hadn't looked at it in years, but he knew what it showed: two young men, identical twins' arms, over each other's shoulders. One in a business suit, the other in hiking gear. Himself and Sebastian. Sebastian Cain, his brother, his opposite, his loss. Gone 5 years now, lost in a climbing expedition in Patagonia. Never married, never had children. At least that's what Alexander had believed. Until now. He turned slowly, eyes falling again on Luca. The shape of the cheekbones, the dimple that only appeared when he tried to smile, the exact same crinkle at the corner of the eye that Sebastian had when he was 5. No, it couldn't be. But something, some ache in his chest, told him it could. Just then his phone buzzed. Margot Cain, of course. He silenced the call and looked back to the boys. Mrs. Dalloway returned moments later with 2 sets of fresh clothes and steaming bowls of soup. "They'll stay in the guest wing," Alexander said to her quietly. "Keep 'em warm. Keep them comfortable." "Of course, sir," she said, her gaze flicking between him and the children, clearly realizing something had shifted in the house. In him, once the boys had finished their soup and were ushered away for warm baths. Alexander finally stepped into his private office and returned Margot's call. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "I saw the security feed," she said coldly. 2 children. "Are we running a daycare now?" "They were left at the gate," Alexander replied. "In the rain. I don't care if they were dropped from a UFO. You brought them inside." "That's a liability. They're just children, Margot." Margot scoffed. "Since when did you care about children?" Alexander didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the old photo again, on Sebastian's easy smile. "You're not thinking clearly," she continued. "You've been off lately. You're canceling meetings, ignoring the board, and now this." He finally spoke. "They may be related to us." There was a sharp silence. To Sebastian, he clarified. "That's ridiculous," Margot snapped. "Sebastian didn't have kids. You don't know that." "And you do," she hissed. "Did he write it in a secret will?" "Leave a note under your pillow. I looked into one of their faces tonight," Alexander said quietly, "and I saw him." Margot's voice dropped. "Listen to me very carefully. If you bring these children in and someone finds out they have any claim to the Cain estate, it will explode. Half of the company still doubts your focus after Sebastian's death. This will ruin you. Alexander's voice was firm now. I don't care about the company. Margot was silent. You're making a mistake, she said finally. I've made 100, Alexander replied. But not this one. He hung up. Alone in the room, he sat down slowly and stared at the flames dancing in the fireplace. For a man who had spent his entire life building walls, he had never imagined that 2 tiny hands knocking at his gate could tear them all down in a single night. And yet, they had. The morning came quietly. Sunlight slipped through the sheer curtains of the east wing, casting golden streaks across the polished floors. Alexander Cain, usually up before dawn to review global reports or speak with markets in Tokyo, found himself uncharacteristically disoriented. He had barely slept. Instead, his mind kept returning to that moment at the gate, the way Luca had looked at him and said, "Daddy," like it was something he believed with every fiber of his little being. Alexander stepped into the hallway just as Mrs. Dalloway appeared from the opposite direction, carrying a tray. "They're awake," she said softly, both dressed. "Ate their cereal. The smaller one keeps asking if you'll come see his drawing." Alexander hesitated. He had postponed a strategy call with the board this morning, a call he never would have missed, not even during a merger. But somehow that felt less urgent than what was waiting in the kitchen. When he stepped through the doorway, the twins looked up instantly. Luca beamed. "Hi." Noah offered a small nod. Mrs. Dalloway let us draw with her pencils. On the table lay a simple crayon sketch, a big house, 2 stick-figure boys, and a tall man in a suit standing beside them. Above the house, in crooked block letters, "Our new home." Alexander swallowed. His voice came out rough. "That's quite a drawing." "Do you like it?" Luca asked, eyes shining. Alexander nodded, unable to say more. He took a seat across from them, watching as Noah carefully organized a napkin and fork for his brother. A gesture so instinctive, it made Alexander pause. The way they looked after each other, the way they always seemed to move in sync. "Did your mother ever talk about your father?" he asked quietly. The boys looked at each other, that same silent communication he'd noticed the night before. "She said he was brave," Noah said, "and kind, but he couldn't be with us." Why not, she never said. Alexander sat back, his thoughts spinning. If Riley Dawson Sebastian's rumored girlfriend years ago had given birth to twins, and if those boys were left behind after her death, then someone had known. Someone had made a decision to keep them hidden, and now they'd been abandoned at his gate like an afterthought. He didn't realize his fists had clenched until Luca touched his arm. "Are we staying?" the boy asked. The question cut deeper than it should have. "Yes," Alexander said finally. "You're staying, as long as you need." From the doorway, Mrs. Dalloway blinked back a small smile. Over the next several days, the Cain Mansion began to change. Alexander canceled meetings. For the first time in years, his calendar was filled with things like school enrollment forms, toy deliveries, and calls to pediatricians. Rooms that had stood empty for decades now echoed with laughter, running footsteps, and the occasional crash. One such crash happened late one afternoon during a quiet moment between conference calls. Alexander had stepped into the parlor to check his messages when a sharp shatter pierced the silence. He rushed upstairs. In one of the guest rooms, Luca was crouched on the floor beside a broken vase, eyes wide with panic. His hands were trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to. Please don't send us away." Alexander stopped cold. "What did you say?" "I'm sorry, I didn't know it would fall. I tried to catch it. Luca." The boy looked up. "You're not going anywhere," Alexander said firmly. "It's just a vase." "But it looks expensive," Noah said quietly, appearing in the doorway. It was Alexander admitted. "But things can be replaced." "People can't." He wasn't sure where the words had come from. They felt strange in his mouth, soft, unguarded. But they landed. Luca exhaled, slowly nodding. And just like that, something inside Alexander cracked open further. That night, as the boys got ready for bed in their new matching pajamas, dinosaurs chosen by Luca Alexander found himself seated at the edge of the bed, holding a book. Noah nestled in beside his brother. "Will you read with us? I don't usually." He caught himself. "Yes, I will." His voice was rusty but steady as he read "Goodnight Moon" aloud, the words drifting through the dimly lit room like an incantation. It was the first bedtime story he had read since Sebastian had asked him to read one to his goddaughter, nearly 15 years ago. As he closed the book, Luca looked up at him with heavy eyes. "Will you be here tomorrow?" The question was so simple, and yet it caught Alexander completely off guard. He had spent his life planning tomorrows for corporations, for shareholders, for markets that never slept. But no one had ever asked him that before. "Yes," he said after a beat, "I'll be here tomorrow." And for the first time in decades, he meant it. But not everyone was pleased. The next day, Margot Cain appeared at the mansion unannounced, furious, flawless, and armed with a portfolio of legal documents. "You've officially lost your mind," she declared, striding into his office. "Do you know how many red flags this raises for the board?" Alexander didn't look up from his desk. "They're just children, Margot." "They're liabilities," she snapped. "You gave up power of your schedule, you're dodging investors, and you've invited two strangers to live here based on a feeling. They're not strangers. You don't even know they're related to us? Then I'll find out," he said, standing. Margot narrowed her eyes. "You're serious? Dead serious? Fine." Her voice went icy. "But if it turns out they're not Cain blood, I will personally see to it that the board removes you." Alexander walked past her, calm and composed. "I'm not afraid of DNA," he said. "I'm afraid of ignoring what's right in front of me." He left her standing there, stunned, as he walked back toward the sound of laughter echoing from the hallway, from the sound of family forming in real time. It started with a cough. Nothing alarming, just a dry, scratchy sound as Luca sat at the breakfast table, pushing his scrambled eggs around with a fork. Alexander didn't think much of it. Children got colds, especially after being out in the rain. But by noon, Luca was pale. By evening, he was burning with fever. And by midnight, he was in the emergency room. Alexander stood in the hallway of the pediatric unit, arms crossed, tightly pacing the tiles, as doctors and nurses moved around him. His thoughts spun like gears slipping off track. He had faced corporate sabotage lawsuits, hostile takeovers, but nothing like this. He wasn't prepared for this. "Doctor." Hannah Lee, the attending physician, stepped out of the exam room and approached him calmly. "He's stable," she said. "But he's showing signs of severe aplastic anemia." Alexander blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means his bone marrow isn't producing enough new blood cells. His immune system is compromised. He's at risk for infection fatigue, spontaneous bleeding. In his case, the condition appears aggressive." Alexander swallowed. "What's the treatment, doctor?" Lee hesitated. "The best course is a bone marrow transplant, sooner rather than later. From who a close genetic match. Ideally, a sibling or biological parent." Alexander's jaw tightened. Noah was already being tested, but they weren't identical twins. And Alexander, he looked down at the test requisition form in his hand. "I want to be tested," he said. "Now, doctor." Lee gave him a soft look. "Mr. Cain. The chances of an unrelated adult being a match are, I don't care. Test me." She nodded, then added quietly, "If there's any chance he's your biological child, even a relative of yours, the odds are better than zero." He didn't pray. He hadn't in years. But the silence helped. He thought of Sebastian, his brother, his shadow, the free-spirited one, the one who had escaped their father's cold legacy by scaling mountains instead of stock charts. Could Sebastian have fathered these boys? Was Luca this fragile, burning boy with eyes just like his nephew? A day later, the test results came in, and they shattered him. Probability of biological relation, 0.01%. Lee read the results aloud with visible confusion. "I'm sorry. But according to this, you're not a match. Not even a distant relative." Alexander stared at the paper, heart pounding. "That's not possible," he said flatly. "Look at them. Look at me. They're Cain. I know it." "Dr." Lee frowned. "I agree it's strange, but DNA doesn't lie. Unless someone made it lie." Back at the mansion, Alexander stormed into his private office and picked up the phone. "Garrett," he said to his head of security, I need you to pull surveillance footage from the hospital lab and the courier service. And I need you to quietly review the chain of custody for the DNA samples. Garrett didn't ask questions. He never did. Understood, sir. By midnight, he had the answer. Someone tampered with the lab results Garrett confirmed. The report you were given came from a secondary account, not from the official hospital system. Who Alexander asked, though part of him already knew. Garrett handed him a flash drive. On it, security footage showed a woman in dark glasses and a silk scarf entering the lab under a false appointment. She signed in under the name Margot Dean, an alias Margot Cain had used during acquisitions in Europe. Alexander clenched the flash drive in his palm until his knuckles turned white. The next morning he confronted her. Margot sat in the Cain Enterprises boardroom, immaculate in navy silk, reviewing acquisition contracts. "You lied," Alexander said, tossing the flash drive onto the table. She didn't flinch. "Good morning to you, too. You forged the DNA results. I protected the company. You risked a child's life." Margot stood. "Don't be dramatic. You were spiraling. Abandoning meetings, obsessing over 2 kids who are family. You have no proof of that." "I will." He stepped closer, voice low. "You think this is about money, about legacy, but this is about blood. You tried to erase it, and now a child could die because of your pride." Margot's voice cracked just slightly. "You don't understand. If they are Sebastian's, they'll inherit his shares, his seat. Do you know what that means? It means Sebastian didn't die without leaving something behind." She fell silent. "Luca's dying," Alexander said, "and I'm going to save him, with or without your help." Lee reappeared with a look of shock on her face. "We ran additional tests," she said softly. "Despite the initial report, you are a genetic match." Alexander stared at her. "How you're an exceptionally close match. As close as we would expect from, well, a biological father." "I'm not their father." She tilted her head. "Do you have an identical twin?" He exhaled slowly. "Yes." She nodded. "Then it makes sense. Identical twins share nearly the same DNA. If your brother was their father, you're a near-perfect match." "So I can donate?" "Yes, immediately." As Alexander lay in the sterile hospital prep room, IV and his arm machines beeping steadily, he thought of the boy he was about to save. The boy who called him Dad before ever knowing what the word meant. And of Sebastian, the brother, who had always walked a different path, but somehow through fate or design had led his children right to him. Alexander didn't believe in signs, but as the anesthesia crept in and the world began to blur, he whispered into the sterile air, "I've got them now, Seb. I won't let go." The sky over Manhattan was pale and cloudless the morning Luca came home. 3 weeks had passed since the transplant. Weeks of tension blood, Count's late-night fevers, and whispered prayers Alexander never admitted he said. But now, as the automatic gates of Cain Estate opened and the black town car pulled in, the sound of laughter, real unfiltered living, laughter spilled out onto the driveway. Luca stuck his head out the back window wind, whipping his short hair. "We're back," Noah grinned from the seat beside him. And even Alexander, still in his tailored charcoal jacket, loosened his tie with a rare smile. His hand rested lightly on Luca's shoulder. "Yes," he said. "You're home." Gone were the sterile hallways and pristine emptiness. In their place, dinosaurs drawn on walls, fridge magnets shaped like rockets, and a teddy bear permanently seated on the grand piano bench. Mrs. Dalloway no longer raised an eyebrow when a trail of cereal led from the kitchen to the living room. She just swept it up and smiled. Alexander stood in his study that evening, looking out the window as the twins ran barefoot through the garden. Sunlight spilled over them like something sacred. Noah was chasing Luca in slow, careful circles, always letting his brother win. Behind Alexander, Garrett entered, clearing his throat. "It's done, sir." Alexander turned. The papers, Garrett handed him the folder. Inside, crisp and legal official adoption documents, signed, sealed, and finalized. 2 names, Noah Dawson Cain and Luca Dawson Cain. The names of his brother, the names of his sons. "Thank you," Alexander said quietly. "There's more," Garrett added. "The foundation launch is scheduled for next week. Press invites have gone out. Alexander nodded. The Sebastian Cain Pediatric Hope Foundation, established to fund treatment and research for rare blood disorders, had been his next step, not for publicity, but to make sure no other child slipped through the cracks the way Luca nearly had. Make sure the twins are there, he said. It's their story too. Helena's hospital, where Luca had spent his most fragile nights. A small orchestra played softly. Guests mingled. Reporters hovered near velvet ropes. And in the center of it all stood Alexander Cain, with a boy on either side. Are you nervous? Noah whispered. A little, Alexander admitted. Luca squeezed his hand. You don't have to be. We're right here. When he stepped to the podium, the crowd hushed. Alexander looked down at the cards in his hand, then folded them and placed them aside. I've spoken at IPOs, summits, and shareholder meetings, he began. But I've never spoken at something quite like this. This isn't about numbers, or markets, or margins. This is about life, about family. He glanced at the boys. 3 months ago, I didn't know these two. I wasn't looking for them. I didn't even know I needed them. But they found me anyway. A ripple of emotion passed through the audience. They taught me that family isn't always what you expect. Sometimes it shows up on your doorstep in the rain calling you Dad, before you even know who you are to them. He paused, and I want the world to know I am their father, in every way that matters, and I always will be. The applause began softly, then rose into a standing ovation. Margot, watching from the second row, wiped something from her eye before she turned and quietly left the event. Later that night, after cake and confetti after the crowd had gone and the city lights blinked below, Alexander sat on the back steps of the mansion with the twins curled beside him. Can we ask you something? Noah said. Anything, Alexander replied. Do you think Uncle Sebastian knows? Luca whispered. About us. About you. Alexander looked up at the sky. Stars barely visible over the city. I think he knew what he was doing when he left a part of himself behind, he said slowly. And I think maybe he knew I'd find you. Luca leaned his head on Alexander's arm. Noah closed his eyes. I'm glad he did, Noah murmured. Because now we're not alone anymore. Alexander wrapped his arms around them, held them close. Neither boy saw the single tear slip down his cheek. Not from sadness, not from grief, but from the quiet, breathtaking truth that after a lifetime of power, wealth, and silence, Alexander Cain had finally found what he never even knew he was searching for: family.